Good evening. You're watching ThinkTech Asia, and I'm your host, David Day. And this evening we have a very special program with you, and I'd like you to meet our special guests. Jamie Lum, who is with the Economic Development Group at Hawaii's Department of Business, Economic Development, and Tourism. I don't know that title, Jamie. It's just, we always call it DBED, so welcome.
Thank you.
And we also have with us Mr. Michael Sacharski, who is the chairman of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. And Mike, nice to have you back on the program with us.
David, thank you for the invitation. Delighted to be here today.
What we want to do, ladies and gentlemen, is talk a little bit about the whole notion of accelerating business internationally. We'll be talking about Hawaii's business and how that's done. But before we kind of get into that broad topic, I want to share with you through Jamie and Mike a very interesting program that is directed specifically at this, and the program is called the Business of Exporting. And before we get into this in any real depth, let us have producer, if we could have slide number 4 up here, and just for a second here, just to kind of introduce this to our audience. And then I want to go to you, Jamie, and how about, could you give us kind of the vision of assisting business that the Business Development Group at DBED has?
Well, basically, we want to help our local companies to grow in revenues and grow their companies, so basically they create more jobs. And one of the ways they can do this is by exporting. And so it's helpful to them, for those that know nothing about exporting, to learn about what's involved in exporting and to make that decision of if that's a step they want to take. For those companies that are already exporting, we would like to see them be able to increase the amount of exports that they are doing. So it's really about the bottom line of helping the companies to grow, helping to create more jobs for people in Hawaii. And
you use the term exporting within DBED. Is that a focus purely on manufactured goods?
No, we are looking at services as well. In fact, my particular branch, in the past, we've worked a lot with companies that provide services, architects, engineers, environmental services, and so forth. So there's definitely a lot of need, especially in the Asian countries, for those type of services. So we aren't just looking at products; we are looking at services.
Okay, and Mike, you have through the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, you have developed a very novel, interesting educational approach to solving or working on the problem that Jamie has just described, have you not?
Well, you know, if you look at the title page that was just up on the screen.
Let's go back to number 4, if we could, please.
You'll notice that the word business is italicized. And that is to emphasize that the concentration of this program, it's a 9-month program, is on just that, the business, starting with the business process of a company itself, getting that in order, and then gradually building out toward exporting.
Let's go, if we could, to slide number 6 now. And Mike, let me ask you to talk about this whole basic concept that underlies this 9-month educational training that is coming up for Hawaii business. So,
well, you see in the center your business, and your business is run as a profit center.
Okay.
That's the
sure.
Mission of every business. And so the first part of the program concentrates on how well you're running that profit center, how deep is your profit pool. But then there are things that squeeze your profit pool. And one of the things that squeeze your profit pool is the regulatory environment that you have to work in, both locally and abroad. And the other squeeze comes from the export industry itself, all the various services that it takes to get your product placed to where it needs to go. And so the program looks at how you manage your profit pool within the context of having it squeezed, and we're going to be looking at efficiencies and
Ways to unsqueeze?
Ways to maybe not unsqueezed too much, but we're going to be looking at the ways that you manage your business to minimize the squeeze and therefore accumulate more profit.
Okay.
So this is a profit-driven program.
All right, and so is this program aimed at the small entrepreneur or some company that has 1 or 2 employees, or who's the target? Who are the target students?
Jamie and I have worked on that together, and Jamie, why don't you take off and give a brief description on
Right. Well, we're looking really at a range, David, of companies, those that are possibly experienced, veterans, but there's always more out there. They say 95% of the purchasing power is outside of the U.S., so there's always more for the companies to grow. So we're looking at those that are experienced, those that have maybe just started exporting, maybe they've hit some bumps in the road, looking for ways to improve that, and then those that are at a point where they're looking at exporting as a possible way of expanding their business, but they're not quite sure if they have what it takes. So it's kind of at really three levels.
So
right?
if I hear what you're saying, you're describing a situation where you have an educational process, and there might be a senior executive of, as an example, Hawaiian Electric sitting next to a senior executive of Hawaiian Airlines, maybe, who's sitting next to a fired up entrepreneurial Kona coffee producer from the Big Island, who's sitting in and who's sitting next to an executive not from a product manufacturing company, but maybe from one of our environmental services firms or architectural firms.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have that picture quite?
Yes, correct. So there would be a mix, definitely.
Right. The program is open to all companies across the state of Hawaii on all islands, producers as well as service companies, large, small companies. So we want to get as has been pointed out, we want to get a nice mix, a nice diversity that represents the cross-section of Hawaii's companies.
Okay, control room, if you could bring up our slide number 7 here to show the audience here. And Mike, let me ask you if you could just do a quick overview of what this special educational opportunity is going to be like.
Well, this 9-month program is going to have a core curriculum, and you see the core curriculum outlined here. We're starting, as I said, concentrating on the company itself, and so in the first unit we're going to be taking a look at your company as a profit center, how to improve it as a profit center. Then we're going to move to managing the first squeeze, if you will, which are the regulatory costs. Then we'll move on to managing the export industry, and along the way, in those 3 units, the participating companies will be refining their existing business plan and future business plan as they go along. As we reach that point of refinement, then we're going to look in Unit 4 at emerging trends in global trade over the next 24 months to see how these trends could and probably will impact these companies and what adjustments they might have to make. And then we're going to finish up the 5th unit with what's called planned innovation. Planned innovation can be done by any company of any size and any business. And we're going to look at re-engineering in order to keep the company moving at a fresh level.
Okay. Let's go to slide number 8 if we could. And Mike, just very briefly, we'll end this section of the program in just a second here, but describe what this chart really lays out. I see a blue line and a red line.
Right.
What's the difference between those two?
Well, there are going to be large group presentations, one-day seminars, and then the participants will have a series of small group meetings in the weeks following the large group seminars, and those meetings will be hosted by a mentor leader from the Export Council. There will be 2 or 3 of the participating companies in the small group, and that's where we individualize the program for their particular needs. So you see the schedule throughout the next 9 months. Down at the bottom, each company is going to be developing an export objective that they will accomplish before the program is over. And then finally, we're going to have the companies put together financial prospectus, which can be used by the time the program's over to potentially attract funding they might not have been eligible for before they started the program.
Okay, let me go over to you, Jamie. What is the internal discussion, and we're through with this particular slide. What's DBED's reaction to this?
Well, I think it's really an exciting program because we've not seen a program like this that really goes as deep as the Export Council is intending to take this program. We've helped to support Export University in the past, and that's been a good program for companies that are looking at exporting, but it was a very broad brush, I think, and I think that this is a chance really for companies to as Mike described, all the different units, really to dig deep down and see, for those that are, looking at this as a possibility, is this really something that my company is positioned to do? And then for those that are at the other end, as we described, those that have been exporting, how can we perhaps, what are some innovative things we can do in our company to really increase our export capacity? The other thing is, DBED has been focused a lot on the High Growth Initiative, which is being led by our Hawaii Strategic Development Corporation, our sister agency, helping to, at all different levels, with helping entrepreneurs start up new companies.
Okay.
That's where the focus has been. But this, I think, fits in really well because it kind of hits where high growth is looking a lot at technology and young entrepreneurs. This can help not only service companies, but a lot of the very traditional companies really look at.
Bank of Hawaii. Go ahead.
Really look at what they're doing and how they can improve what they're doing to take more advantage of exporting opportunities to grow their export.
Okay,
so yeah,
all right. One last question, and then we'll go in a different direction here. Mike, real fast. How does a company who's watching this, business leader and executive, how do they get their company into this program? What do they got to do?
Yeah, we'll be announcing a website link to the Hawaii Pacific Export Council website, and it'll have all the information about the program. And there'll be an online registration process, application form for them to fill out.
Okay, let's go and talk about something a little bit different here that I think is maybe interesting to folks in our audience here. And control room, if we could bring up slide number 1 as an example here. And ladies and gentlemen, we've been talking about this new innovative program being sponsored by the Hawaii Export Council called the Business of Exporting. And earlier in the conversation, Jamie, you and I were talking about the notion that exports in the true sense of the word, as visualized by DBED, include both products and services.
Correct.
And so this slide number 1 here has some interesting numbers that the value, the 2013 number for exports, about 600 million, but only
yes.
for...
It only measures products, and that's because of this data is taken from the Census Bureau, and it looks at the forms that are that exporters have to send through customs, so it looks at the value of what's being... So it's only able to measure products. It cannot measure services.
But here's the interesting thing about the Hawaii economy, and it seems to me, and you have been with... working in this whole area of business development with DBED for
about 12 years.
12 years. So you got some perspective on this.
Yes.
So it does seem to be that the Hawaii economy, we are not a manufacturing economy. Let's face it, right?
Correct.
And so the strength and the firepower of the Hawaii economy is in services.
That's right.
And if we could go back to slide number 1 now again, I noticed that the estimate for 2014 is $6 billion in
Right.
services.
Yes.
Now, obviously, that includes tourism and hotels, which is treated as an
Yes,
export.
Yes. So the last estimate that we have, which is in 2007, which our research division puts out through an input-output model, came up with that figure. But as you pointed out, it doesn't include all the tourism services. So, but as you can see, I mean, what a great, as that 2014 number. There's really so much potential.
A lot of potential, a lot of opportunities for the traditional product businesses, but as well as the service businesses. And we'll have more about the developing and acceleration of Hawaii's business into the international field when we come back after the break. Stay with us.
Hello, I'm Martin Despang, and I'm the host together with the one and only Ali Yamashita, and our show is called Urban Transcendence. And urban transcendence is about identifying where we have a unique situation of a vibrant city in one of the most beautiful natural environments. So how these two can coincide, sometimes conflict, how they could find reciprocity in the 21st century is what we're excited about. And we're planning on bringing in a diverse body of guests, both from the arts and the science and the established and the wise and the emerging generation. So hope you will join us. We'll always be on Thursdays from 1 to 2 p.m. Thank you.
We're back. You're watching ThinkTech Asia, and our program this evening is all about accelerating Hawaii's businesses internationally. And if you just joined us, we were talking in the first section of this program all about a very innovative educational program that's being put together by as kind of a strategic partnership between the Hawaii Export Council, represented by its chairman Mike Sacharski here, and the lead spear, flag, and howitzer carrier for the Department of Business, Education, and Tourism, Jamie Lum. All right. Let's do this. One of the things that right before the break, we were talking about this split between Hawaii businesses that make products and those that provide services, and the fact that this education program is new in the sense that it's going to go after both. And I mean, you have to help me with this because you're the one with the perspective, Jamie. I don't recall any educational programs that we've run in the business community that have been focused in trying to assist service companies. Am I right?
Yeah, we've not had anything from the department side, certainly not in any sort of education or training or mentoring or accelerate. We've been focused more on just trying to find markets for them, but not really looking at the company and helping the company to look at themselves to see how they can actually, go after business. So, so this really is a new approach for us, and we, like I said, we're really excited about it because it offers, yet another service for our companies to help them, move in this direction
Mike,
for our service companies.
We've used the word here in the studio to describe this whole notion as accelerating. And what's your perspective on assisting a business to get out and do more internationally? You have about a 3+ decade experience working in Asia. In China, you're what we call the classic China hand. From that perspective, what's your notion of helping a company to accelerate internationally? What does that mean?
Yeah, I began working with companies in 1984 that were exporting, and many of them were small and medium-sized companies, and I learned a lesson right away that has carried through and is still valid today, and that is that your success overseas starts with how firm your foundation is at home. And if you have a firm foundation, then your chances of succeeding are extremely high. And that's what the concentration of this program is on, is looking and examining companies to find out where their strengths are, where their weaknesses are, how they can get their business process into alignment so they're very strong and stable to then go out into the international market.
And you know, this is something that we've seen a lot of false starts in companies that are all fired up and excited about breaking into the China market, and you know, they just start to get that first pallet of goods or the first contracts into China, and they think that that's the road to riches, to success. And what you're saying is, you know, unless you've got a foundation at home, you're going to fall flat on your face.
That's right. And China's, if you take a dynamic market like China, it can actually ruin a company
What do you mean?
in the sense that the demand for goods and services can overwhelm the company's ability to meet that demand. And so weaknesses begin to appear very quickly, starting, you can almost make a roadmap out of it. First person to crack is the production engineer or production supervisor. And then it just like cracks in the wood, it just emanates out through the rest of the company. And before you know it, the company is headed toward collapse because they cannot handle the stress of these this kind of enormous demand.
Control room, let's go back to slide number 6, if we could, please, here. And Mike, and earlier in the program, you talked about this conceptual drawing a little bit. And how about explain for our audience what's the connection between this slide and the notion that you've just talked about the importance of having the foundation solid at home before you start venturing out over the reef?
Well, if you look at a company process, it involves everything from the value of the product. What's the value of the product to begin with? Does it have a value proposition? Is it a value proposition that is going to be durable and sustainable? Then you look at the company's ability to deliver that value proposition, and that's part of the business process, getting materials, organizing the workflow, putting capital to the factors of production, all of the day-to-day business operations that need to be carried out in order to produce a quality product or service and then deliver it. If you're not doing that, then you're not ready to go overseas. And we advise companies that if you go too soon, if you go prematurely, your shelf life is probably not going to be very long, because there are documented examples by the hundreds of companies that overreached before they were ready. You know, no company is ever built for exporting.
Why is that? Why do you
Because companies evolve in a culture. They evolve initially in a home culture, in a local culture.
Okay.
Because
Okay.
they're created in the first place for that home culture. No one creates a company that is in one culture that's going to immediately begin exporting to another culture. Now you have workshops. People build workshops in China or wherever, but those are not companies, those are workshops. But if you're building a company, there's a cultural context to that company. And the cultural context in the world today is still very, very strong. And so the gravitational pull of your local cultural context, you've got to master that before you can go out and master cultures you don't know about.
Well, you know what, let's do. Control room, let's put up slide number 3 for just a moment here. And Jamie, let me ask you, following on what Mike was just talking about, the cultures involved, let's talk about where does Hawaii export?
Right.
Kind of an interesting list of
Right.
countries.
If you look at the list, well, 2 places, and I know we always advise companies that are looking at exporting: Australia, Canada. We're looking at the top 10 because they're
interestingly-
English-speaking companies,
Okay.
countries, but mostly Asian countries, and we would kind of make that assumption because
Neighborhood.
of right.
Okay.
But Yeah, interesting to see at number 8 Netherlands and 10 the UK. So I'm not really sure. um, they're buying our, I don't know, coffee, our Mac nuts, we even said, I know it's not on the list that I had, but some chocolate, our
Well, let's go to slide number 2 for a second here, and because let's talk about some of the, what do we really export? And this isn't just in terms of products. And so, ladies and gentlemen, understand that there are services that are exported out of Hawaii, legal services, financial,
Right.
banking, all kinds of things. But we go back to this list here. I mean, when bottled water.
Bottled water is number 1. I think that a lot of that is because of
Who would have thought
the
that
movement.
an island that we export bottled water is our main product?
I think a lot of that came from the whole craze, and it's still big in Asia, the deep sea water that's pumped up from 2,000, 3,000 feet below, and it has a lot of nutrients, and that really sells in Asia. They look at it as very pure and nutrient rich, so bottled water, yes.
What about this whole notion of paintings and drawings and artwork being a major export out of Hawaii? I mean, what is that? Is it just a handicraft collection?
I mean, we are a very creative population. So, and with the mixture of cultures, that is another surprise too. But from our creative industries people, they say that a lot of Hawaiian arts and so forth sell well in Asia too. Hong Kong, I know that's on the list. They buy a lot of art from Hawaii. So,
in terms of art, and probably be interesting to see sometime in the future if we could have a list of top service exports out of Hawaii. On the artist side, it'd be interesting to see the numbers in the film industry for films that have a major portion of the production shot in Hawaii here, what those numbers look like, because it's probably very substantial.
I'm sure that our film office has some of those, and I could, try to get some of those and that could be a topic of another show. But
well, let's talk about the benefits to companies getting involved in this whole notion of accelerating themselves with a little bit of help from their friends kind of notion. If we visualize readiness, Mike, as a stairway, and you got to get to the top step before you're all set to safely start doing business internationally. What are some of the things that you look at to determine where a company, whether it's large or small, where it fits on that stairway?
I think what is its reserve capability? Because right now that company is producing at a certain amount of capacity for the local market or maybe the mainland market. And if you're running your company efficiently, you have as many resources as you need to meet that requirement.
Right.
However, what's your ability to call up additional resources to fulfill demand that is going to be created by exporting, because now you're expanding production. So in fact, you were talking about the steps, and I was just thinking maybe sort of an image would be the old stairway to the airliners. And so are you ready to climb that stairway to get on the airliner to fly overseas and sell your product? And so what steps what do you have to do in your company to go up each step of that stairway to the airliner? And so that's the biggest.
One of the things you have pointed out earlier, just excuse me for interrupting you, is that a lot of companies, they actually climb the steps and get on board, and maybe they haven't checked their baggage, paid for their ticket, or they don't even have a passport.
Right, or they don't know where they're staying when they get there.
Or they don't know where the plane is going to go.
Right,
Okay.
exactly.
I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that was fine. And so the way you test is the ability of a company to marshal those resources in a reasonable way to meet that increased production when is created by overseas demand.
So Jamie, if you visualize the Hawaii business community, and if we were to follow what Mike has just laid out for us, what we would see was we'd have this massive stairway, and the Hawaii companies, whether they're large or small, medium size, or they're in products or they're in services, they actually fit today on one particular step in that stairway. And so my question to you is, what is the objective of DBED? Which of those companies are you really, really focused on in this particular iteration, this go-round?
All of them, really. I mean, we because ultimately, as I said, we want them all to be successful. We want them to grow and to, you know, create more jobs for, you know, people here in Hawaii. But you know, at any of the levels we're talking about of businesses, and their expertise or their exporting, you know, background, they can always, as Mike described, you know, look at their company and see just, you know, what can we do, you know, how can we, what kind of innovations can we come up with to go up to that next level. So you know.
We're going to take a short commercial break here, and ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back. Stay with us with Jamie Lum of DBED and Mr. Michael Sacharski of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council on the other side of the break.
Aloha, this is Keli'i Akina. It's my privilege to be the host of Ehana Kako, a weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Ehana Kako, what does that mean? Well, many people have heard of Epule Kako, let's pray together. Ehana Kako means let's work together. Let's work together to build a better economy, government, and society. And every week, Monday from 2 to 3 o'clock, you will see movers and shakers and other people who are working together to build a better economy, government, and society. Again, I'm Keli'i Akina on the Ehana Kako weekly program on the ThinkTech Hawaii broadcast network. Aloha, see you here Mondays 2 to 3.
You're watching ThinkTech Asia, and we were talking this evening about accelerating Hawaii's businesses internationally with Jamie Lum from DBED and the chairman of the Hawaii Pacific Export Council, Michael Sacharski. And so if you've just joined us, earlier in the program we were talking about a very innovative educational program that's designed for companies in Hawaii, whether they are products or services, trying to, as you pointed out right before the break, Jamie, push them to the next level.
Correct.
Or motivate them to the next level, something like that. All right. Well, you know, if we talk about this whole concept of moving a business up this stairway, if you will, aren't we really talking about entrepreneurism, entrepreneurial talents within a company?
Sure, I think so, because it is about thinking, you know, creatively, innovatively of how to keep your company moving forward, and you know, taking risks possibly of you know, stepping out there, especially for a company that is right at that point where they're ready to export, and you know, this is a whole new ball game for them, you know, selling to the rest of the world outside of Hawaii, outside of the U.S. So you know, there has to be some of that ability and readiness to take some of those risks. So yeah, I do think it's about, even if it's a company that's been around though, how can they push themselves to that next level? How can they innovate? Again, you know, on that thinking entrepreneurially, even if it's a company that's been around for a while.
You know, Mike, we often think of an entrepreneur. I know folks in our audience do. They're thinking of the Mark Zuckerberg in his dorm room as being an entrepreneur at that time in his life.
Right.
And what's your concept of an entrepreneurial company? What's that like?
Well, entrepreneurial companies are driven, of course, from the top down by the entrepreneur-in-chief, who's usually the founder of the company and the guiding light. And as an entrepreneur, entrepreneurs never stop. So a company might be 5, 10, 20 years old or more, and as long as that entrepreneurial chief is there, that company keeps modify. They don't give up their core principles. They have core principles that they
Okay.
live by from year to year, and those never change. But it's the application, the solutions and applications around those core principles that change. And so the most successful companies are those that have longevity, that have that entrepreneurial ability to keep innovating and even re-engineering to some extent over and over and over again, but keeping their core principles in place.
So as we look at the folks in the audience are thinking about the Hawaii business community and our large companies, I mean, would you put Hawaiian Airlines in that category of being an entrepreneurial company?
Well, they've been, I think 1927 is when they first started flying, so they have quite a distinguished history. And they started out as entrepreneurs because when you look at the inter-island aircraft that they used in 1927,
You have to be an entrepreneur to want to fly one of those.
and so that was an entrepreneurial move right from the get-go, from the start. And so the company has kept that, and you see with the kind of aircraft the company is ordering. They've got on order some very exciting aircraft capabilities, what they're doing with their route and destination plan and so forth, what they do with their marketing. So that entrepreneurial spirit is still alive and very well manifested in one of our local companies.
Let's go, if we could, control room, to slide number 10. And Mike, I'd like you to kind of describe for the audience the thrust or the focus of the companies that this strategic partnership between DBED and the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. What are your folks expecting to help?
Well, we're looking to, since we're talking about entrepreneurism, we're looking to stoke that entrepreneurism in companies, whether they be large or small on any island and so forth, because that's really the key to success. And so the companies that are going to be chosen, there will be 15 companies chosen for this project. They'll be chosen in part on the evidence of entrepreneurism and on the potential for entrepreneurism, because entrepreneurism is sustainable. Once you become an entrepreneur, you stay an entrepreneur, and that's so coming back. That's part of the acceleration that Jamie was talking about. It's kind of a combination between combustibility, and then once it gets combusted,
It's got to stay combustible.
right? Then you want to keep the momentum going.
Okay.
So we're looking to combust 15 companies, some of whom are already combusted, and they're
Or
thirsty.
combustible. Well, look, combustible is an opportunity too.
Right. And so we're looking at those that are already on their way, but they're thirsty for more. They want to go. And then we're looking for those companies that are on the edge, and they're kind of on the precipice, and they need some acceleration, accelerant, and combust those companies.
Fascinating. Let's go back to slide number 7, if we could. And the reason I want to bring this back up, Mike and Jamie, is that these are the main topics. And I'd like both of you to talk a little bit together, if you can, about kind of the logic of this list of subjects. Why these subjects?
Well, I'll start first, and Jamie jump in. But the progression, these topics are sequenced. And as I said, they're sequenced from inside out. In the past, a lot of the training programs have been from the outside in.
Okay.
So we're starting from the inside out. And then secondly, they are the elements that are characteristic of the kind of entrepreneurism that we've just been talking about. So when you look at those topics over the 5 major areas, they build up to that final topic, which is planned innovation and company re-engineering.
And I think that these are also the areas that companies really need to examine if they're going to, at the end of this project, come up with that, their export plan or come up with that prospectus, to possibly seek more financing. So these hit on really those core areas that they really need to examine in their business.
So the goal is that the companies that are involved in this process, the ones that are selected for this type of large group presentations, the mentoring with specialists and smaller group presentations, the goal at the end of the day is to combust them up to be doing what?
To increasing their profit pool. Remember, I said this is all about profit. And so at the end of the day, the emphasis is on profit, because profit fuels your reinvestment in your company. It fuels your expansion. It fuels the business process. You can't run a company without profit. So that's what the objective is at the end of the day. But I would say we kind of have the idea that if you're an executive or a manager or a founder of a company in Hawaii, and if you sleep at night, we don't want you to apply for this program.
Oh, that cuts out some of you.
We only want people, we only want managers who cannot sleep at night. And there are two reasons why they don't sleep at night. One is they're tossing and turning, worrying about their company. How am I going to do this? How am I going to meet that? What are we going to blah, blah. And then the other kind of person that doesn't sleep at night are those managers who are sparking ideas. And they are sparking so many ideas before they realize that it's 3:30 in the morning, and they say, I got to get up and go to work in a couple of hours. And so those are the two kinds of managers that we're looking for. Managers who cannot sleep at night for one of those two reasons.
Now, this program is directed at some rather sophisticated levels of business expertise, because if I heard both of you earlier in the program, you were talking about you want to go after the top tier companies in Hawaii?
Well, we're looking at the top tier managers. We want, what we're doing is driven from the top down. The lessons learned have to be driven from the top down. So we're targeting the founders, the managers, the presidents, and managing of companies. In terms of top tier companies, there are a lot of companies that can be top tier in their own particular category, and they may not be a large company, they may not be a service company or a manufacturing company, but in their particular category, they may be the top tier company. We've got a lot of interesting products and services that people normally don't hear about that we're producing and providing services for here in Hawaii, that if they can get accelerated, they can really take off and not only expand their domestic market, but expand their overseas market as well.
Jamie, I'm going to ask you to do a little bit of a crystal ball here. I know that you and Mike have worked closely together. I can, and I'm sure our audience can tell that in putting this whole package together. But as you, there are people out there watching this show, and they're saying, okay, so what comes next? And if you could sit back and do the Walt Disney thing and dream, what kind of program would or assistance opportunity would DBED, so far as you know, be interested in creating after this?
Well, hopefully we can, this program will be so successful that we'll want to carry it on, and so that more companies out there can benefit, because like Mike said, it's being limited to 15 companies, and I'm sure that once this first group gets through, and they'll be
combusted.
Yeah, that, exactly. And the word will be out that this is the program to be part of. So we would like to keep that going, but create other kind of opportunities. One of the things that we've been doing is actually going to specific trade shows, and we do trade missions, and we bring Hawaii companies together to go with us to these various events, to try to find business for themselves. So we'll hopefully create more of those kinds of opportunities for companies to be part of. The Hawaii still sells, no matter what your product or your service is, Hawaii still sells. So we always go in together as a group, and we find that there's a lot of power in that. And then hopefully just be able to help companies, perhaps, maybe they need a little bit of support, meaning, financial support, and maybe being able to do some of that. And there is actually a little bit of that built into this. It's a small amount, but there is an incentive for the companies at the end to get some funding to be able to participate in a trade show, do some gold key,
We're about out of time here, and for those of you who've been watching this program, if you came in later on, you're wondering about this seminar, this program. It's called
The Business of Exporting.
The Business of Exporting.
Starts in September and goes through May of 2015.
And you can find out more about it in the next couple days on the website at globalexportsupport.com, which is the website for the Hawaii Pacific Export Council. And we are out of time. And Jamie, thank you so much.
Thank you very much, David. It's been a pleasure.
Good fun, huh?
Yeah.
And Mike, thank you so much.
Thank you, David.
And you're watching ThinkTech Asia, or you've been watching ThinkTech Asia, and we've been talking about accelerating Hawaii's business. Please have a safe drive home. Good night.